I am not keeping this jacket on the entire time. I will pass out if that's the case. Good morning, greetings, and sun salutations. I am your host, Ariana, or Soda, or Pop, depending on your geographical location. After an unprecedented hour-long segment 2 months ago, today we are going to try to bring you some more lighthearted entertainment. Emphasis on try. I am a workaholic. I learned it from my parents. They've owned a real estate company for over 10 years. In fact, I'm sitting in it right now. But even before then, from a young age, I understood the image of working parents and parents that worked hard. I am, after all, the child of immigrants. When I was in elementary school, my mom used to work at Motorola. Remember them? God, that was so cool. And I really loved her job. I found the rows of cubicles, each stuffed with their personalized decor and shiny keyboards and big monitors, beautiful. And I would beg her to let me visit so that I could set up shop at one of the empty cubicles. And I distinctly remember listening to Rihanna's Only Girl in the World and watching the YouTube video and feeling like that was work. Because it should be. Basically, I was this. And I loved being in an office, working. When my parents did start their company and they got their office space, my brother and I spent all of our time there, especially during the summer when we were too young to stay home alone. Now, as a 23-year-old about to begin a master's program, I am very aware of how busy I like to make myself, how much I obsess over work, and how my work goals deeply inform my sense of purpose. Unfortunately, I do dream of labor. It just so happens to be a labor of love. I got my teleprompter in front of me now. The workaholic woman in film is a cool one that can hold a lot of different personalities. She can be the hard-ass, single, soulless boss who makes everybody miserable. She can be the neurotic, high-strung employee looking to prove herself and establish herself. She can be the symbol of a new wave of feminism. The working woman can learn to let herself love or learn to let herself take a break from romance. She can work in fashion, marketing, law. But I want to talk about the working woman of a specific field, broadcast journalism. Yet, I don't want to necessarily focus on the women in front of the camera, the anchors. Today, I want to talk about the programmers, the producers, the executives. In Front Page Girls, Women Journalists in American Culture and Fiction, journalist Jean-Marie Lutez says, "Film characterizations of female reporters do more than illustrate the contradictions of being professional women, however. They dramatize the conditions of sentimental authorship, with its union of professionalism and emotionalism, its commitment to producing sentimental commodities in the form of narratives, and its dependence on female bodies as emotional conduits. Journalism is a fickle field with a dense history. It has the possibilities to expose truth and enlighten the world, but also the power to tell damaging lies and skew public opinion. With great power comes great hesitation to let women and any minorities in the room, to give them such authority and control over information. With different avenues for journalism, be it print, radio, or this video's focus on television, the accessibility of voice, the ability to be heard, to manipulate what is heard by others, and how information is delivered to the masses can be transcendent. And in combining the existing burdens and values of the working woman with this specific field of broadcast television, we can analyze varying depictions of womanhood, including work ethic, love life, and friendships. It's of no minor significance that one of the first women to lead a television show while not being a mother or a wife and have a steady career plays a television producer. Enter Mary Richards of The Mary Tyler Moore Show. While the sitcom That Girl did precede The Mary Tyler Moore Show in shifting this cultural image of women on screen with its lead pursuing acting, critics have noted that That Girl was still more invested with its lead, Anne-Marie, still being taken care of by the men in her life, including her father and her eventual partner. Regardless, both of these roles bring into question the level of femininity a working woman can possess on screen. To be perfectly honest, all of this began with my desire to talk about Brittany Murphy and Holly Hunter in the movie Little Black Book. But I'll talk about a couple of other women too. It's of no surprise, and in fact a great loss, how amazing an actress Brittany Murphy was. We remember Uptown Girls, 8 Mile, Girl Interrupted, but there's one movie where she is equally great that we rarely talk about. Little Black Book is a romantic comedy from 2004. In it, Murphy plays Stacey Holt, a young woman who dreams of working in television, especially alongside Diane Sawyer. Stacy begins a new job as an associate producer at a morning show that's not super interested in hard-hitting news. There, she meets Holly Hunter's Barbara, who, despite only working there for about over a year, knows the ins and outs of the station. The goal of all these producers is to pitch an idea that is so good you get a live show, and you get to executive produce that live show. At the same time, Stacy learns that her boyfriend, Derek, played by Carrie Bradshaw's iconic post-it note heartbreaker Ron Livingston, has a dynamic sexual and romantic history that she actually knows very little about. Together, Stacy, Barbara, and another coworker, Ira, utilize or exploit their production resources to uncover more about Derek's exes while he is away for work. Little Black Book isn't well liked. Even on Letterboxd, the nicest reviews, who still give it some credit, still give it overall a crappy rating. But I am an apologist for this film. I think Little Black Book has a lot of interesting things to say about women with a dream job and how they can function when it comes to romance, friendships, and ambition. And placing this film in the context of other films that position a female lead with TV production, a fascinating tapestry emerges, and Little Black Book becomes a gateway into these topics. You guys like my background? That's here unironically. That is the actual office decor. And I have my mug that says Blossoming Women. Spoilers ahead for Network, Morning Glory, Waiting to Exhale, and of course, Little Black Book.
Lying, crying, wisecracking, mending and unmending their ways, reporter heroines have been celebrated and mocked, rewarded and punished, often in rapid succession. Film depictions of female reporters take up the body-conscious tactics of performative journalism, extending and occasionally unsettling the traditions of women's journalism. Babe, from Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, thus encapsulates a primary dilemma for the newswoman. Her professional success depends on her womanly appeal, but her performance as a sweet young thing unsettles the essential notions of womanhood that make her success possible.
From the beginning of Little Black Book, Stacy is sure of her career aspirations. Her and her mother are close, the major bond between them being Carly Simon, whose music brings them peace when men toss them into chaos. When Stacy goes to college, she sings Nobody Does It Better to find some clarity on whether or not she should stay with her college boyfriend. After singing, she decides to break up with him on graduation day, saying their paths are different, and that she is certain of her decision. He calls her out on this proclamation, saying maybe she's wrong, and he walks away. My mom actually majored in journalism in school in Ecuador, and even though she's not a journalist anymore, she did actually work for a station called Ecuavisa when she was still living there, and she began as the secretary to the director of programming. And eventually she was promoted to become an editor of different trailers for the programs. Just to film in her office is like really special. Jump forward, and Stacy narrates that her life is going according to plan. Sort of. Stacy, like most workaholic women, possesses a great deal of direction, knowing what she wants from her career, and as we'll come to see, where a man can fit into that equation. She begins a new job as an associate producer at the Kippy Can morning show, though she will soon become disillusioned with the workplace, which is another element we see unfold across these films. Stacy wants to be a serious producer, but she won't find those opportunities here. She does, however, find Barbara, who is not great with physical affection but seems nice, and Ira, who has worked here for 3 years but has yet to score a live show. Their desks all in front of each other, Barbara asks about Stacy's huge vintage poster of 1988's Working Girl. Though Working Girl is not about working in journalism, it is an aspirational tale of a working-class woman achieving her dreams at a time where that wasn't that easy. And Little Black Book pays a lot of tribute to the earnest tale through Stacy and, of course, Carly Simon. During one pitch meeting, Ira suggests a story on Little Black Books, using Palm Pilots to uncover who your boyfriend really is. It's dated and it's beautiful. Barbara loves the idea and even suggests that Stacy test it out for herself. Her boyfriend Derek, whom she lives with, has never taken her to meet his parents, and he doesn't really reveal much about his exes. So when the Kippy Can morning show interviews model Lulu Fritz and Derek mentions that they used to date, Stacy is confused. Who is this man that she is dating and knows barely anything about? In classic water cooler convo fashion, Barbara and Ira instill doubt into Stacy about her relationship. After lying about her identity to extract information from Derek's two exes, Lulu and Rachel, Stacy can finally crack the big X, his chef ex-girlfriend, Joyce. On Derek's Palm Pilot are photos, and not only is Joyce there, but so is Derek's family, and they all went on vacation together. Now Stacy is committed, the investigating streak unlocked, the ethics not so much. Stacy lies about her identity once again, but it turns out Joyce is actually really nice, and the two kind of become friends. As they do, Joyce shares more information about her relationship with Derek. She reveals that they still get drinks after every Devils hockey game, but more importantly, that she is still very much in love with Derek. Back at work, Barbara is made an executive producer for a live show, and the day of the taping, she hugs Stacy beforehand, feeling very nervous. Please, I beg you, if you haven't seen Little Black Book, go watch it right now before I tell you how it ends. The ending is so good. My dad had never seen this movie, and he just stuck around, just because, and after the huge reveal, he asked if we could pause so he could use the restroom, and as he was walking away, he was like, wow, that was incredible. Come on, if that doesn't sell you, he doesn't care about these movies. He only likes action movies, war movies, men movies. I actually wrote about this. So if he likes it, please, don't let me spoil it for you. Go watch it for yourself. But as Barbara leads Stacy to the set, she suddenly pushes her on stage. Then in walks Lulu, Rachel, Joyce, and Derek, all there under false pretenses. Barbara's show idea that got her promoted was actually Ira's Little Black Book pitch that she stole, and midway through Stacy's journey, Barbara decided to exploit this relationship to get this golden television moment. On the set, Stacy breaks down and confesses everything to everyone, before confronting Derek on his own secrecy, and finally realizing he loves Joyce too. This is the climax of the movie, and a lot is said here about the institution Stacy is a part of and what it has done to her. I sort of see Little Black Book as the inverse of 13 Going on 30, also released in 2004. In that film, Jenna gets what she wants, popularity, a boyfriend, and her dream job at Poise magazine, and she is not a good person because of it. So she needs to work backwards and undo the wrongs in her life in order to find happiness. She changes the way she operates at work, becoming more ethical and better at her job, but it's too late. And when she finally gets the chance to be 13 again, the film's resolution is not to have her realize this better work ethic, but instead not show it at all. Jenna's reward is to end up with Matt in a suburb, what she does for a living not even alluded to. And though it took up most of the movie and working at a fashion magazine was her dream job since she was a kid, it's not really settled in any way at the film's end. Inversely, Stacy also knows what she wants, doesn't find it exactly, but finds something close enough, and it gradually turns her into a worse person until she is forced to reckon with that. She loses her boyfriend, quits her job, but after going back home and taking some time, she comes back to the city and scores a position working alongside Diane Sawyer. Her resolution, her happy ending, is a dream job still, not a dreamy man. In Little Black Book, it's not Stacy's entire dream that needs to be upended, but she does need to face a tough level of realism and recommit herself, a perfect irony for working at a morning news station that fabricates its stories. In her dissertation, Women in Broadcast Journalism, Cynthia Christine Dodd writes,
"While female broadcast journalists reflect some elements of these ideals, most can be classified as an image of an independent woman, especially women like Chung, Pauley, Savage, Sawyer, and Walters, who were pioneers in the field of broadcast journalism. Women were allowed into a male-only club by legislation, not by merit. By nature, these women were required to possess strength, tenacity, and aggressiveness to survive in a hostile environment from day to day. In addition, for a female to go into broadcast journalism was an adventurous, unconventional route for women in the industry. Being in the public eye, on display, required great confidence, acting ability, courage, and personal drive. Broadcast journalists are atypical people, living lives unlike the majority. Female broadcast journalists are even more unusual social types, economically independent, public women whose lives are seen by all."
While Dodd focuses on prominent women in journalism, most of these women eventually found themselves as anchors at one point or another, which is why she talks about being in the public eye. Now, this video, as I said, is more focused on the producers, but the same sentiment still fits. In these movies, the women are unlike others in their work ethic. They are so determined it's a pillar of their personality, tenacious in order to obtain success, their identity at stake in the process. The notion that they are in the realm of masculinity, of truth and power, motivates them to work twice as hard. Take Holly Hunter again, but this time in 1987's Broadcast News, where she plays producer Jane at a news station in Washington, D.C. Jane is the image of a hardworking woman, and the downsides of that. At a conference, her intellect gets lost in the monotony of her speech and her lack of looks. Like, she is so hot in this movie, but we have to pretend that she's not. Ultimately, Jane is not an anchor. One woman even mocks her appearance during the speech, and everybody leaves before she even finishes. But we witness how good she is at her job. Jane is creative on the spot, considers herself the most intelligent person in the room, and is thoroughly focused and brilliant when she gets the chance to executive produce live breaking news, feeding newcomer anchor Tom lines while giving the tech crew directions. It's breathtaking. Jane is also incredibly resolute and is sturdy in her ethics of being in this industry meant to deliver truth. What we come to see in some of these films is the tremendous resilience of journalists and producers, loving the required neuroses it takes to work in such a fast-paced job. We don't see Jane completely disillusioned with her workplace, but the sudden layoffs and restructuring of the station at the end of the film leaves her devastated when she achieves success, while others are sent home packing. Yet, not every woman who comes in focused comes out kind. Barbara in Little Black Book is one such example. She gets exactly what she wants, and it's glorious in the sense of television drama, but she loses 2 friends in the process. Okay, let's talk about Faye Dunaway and Network. Sidney Lumet's satire is of course unavoidable when talking about the workplace and how the business practices of broadcast journalism can change a person. When anchor Howard Beale learns he is going to be fired, he announces he's going to kill himself on the air. This sends everyone into a tailspin, except Diana Christensen of the programming department. Diana thinks the madness that Howard exhibits is actually good for ratings. Another trend in these films is that the woman is often either new to the job or comes into a station that is failing. She either bears the responsibility of proving her value or proving her program's value. Diana is new to the company, having only been there 6 months, but determined to stake her claim. In her first scene, Diana is not taken very seriously or respected by her coworkers, but she quickly asserts herself. Diana admits that many think that she has a masculine temperament and is inept at everything in life except her work. Direct quote. In committing herself so thoroughly to her work, she is willing to exploit the very real people whose stories she wishes to tell, mutilating their spirit and converting them to products of capital, money-obsessed people. As the film goes on, Diana is likened more and more to a machine, specifically a television. At one point, her lover Max, whom I'll talk about more later, says, "I'm not sure she's capable of any real feelings. She's television generation. The only reality she knows comes to her over the TV set." Later in the film, this motif is elevated, and the dialogue is adjusted accordingly. To her face, Max tells Diana that she is television incarnate, indifferent to suffering, insensitive to joy. The criticism of her character falls in line with the very serious criticism of television news itself. In Television Histories, Shaping Collective Memory in the Media Age, Steve Anderson quotes film theorists' fears of television as a vessel for delivering information, especially important news, to the world. Marianne Doan says, "Television thrives on its own forgettability, relying upon the annihilation of memory, and consequently of history, and its continual stress upon the nowness of its discourse." In Network, this is what drives Diana, the desperate importance of the nowness, of always being relevant regardless of the reason, value, or even truth of your relevance. For Diana, being so work-driven is detrimental to herself and others, and she is embodied by an institution we are meant to fear. Dunaway is incredible at commanding a space, displaying the physicality of an intense, career-driven woman. She paces around rooms, using the office as an arena to get what she wants from other people within them. Diana delivers impassioned monologues that could be comparable to Howard Beale's prophecies on television. She is just behind the scenes, orchestrating a man's demise alongside the corporation's success. What I found so interesting about Network was as Howard becomes more and more of a figure of success for the station, his character is shown less and less, only appearing in glimpses when he is on his show. The script itself mythologizes Howard, while Diana becomes more of the narrative focus. It's her words that get the final say. Her resolution when she says, "Let's kill the son of a bitch," is so determined it ends the scene, as it immediately cuts to what will be Howard's final show. In all of these films, the women in the production rooms want higher ratings. All of them understand it is their job to keep people watching the news. But out of the films I discuss here, Diana and Barbara are the only ones who take it too far. I'll talk a little bit more about Diana and Network a little bit later in a future section, but film critic Pauline Kael was not sold on this character, or the film's messages, viewing her as cynical and an anti-feminist proclamation of the risks of putting women in charge, a deliberate, damaging image in response to second-wave feminism. Network is the oldest film I discuss here, released in 1976, and it allows us to get a better image of the evolving journalistic woman in film, followed by Jane in the 80s, Savannah from Waiting to Exhale in the 90s, Stacy as the late 90s and early 2000s, followed by Rachel McAdams, Becky Fuller in Morning Glory, coming out right in 2010. After that point, we get a lot more TV shows about women in journalism. Diana being the least sympathetic portrayal of this type of woman at least captures a zeitgeist still uncertain of women's role in the office, particularly in an executive role, and whether it was actually feminist for her to be one of the guys. It feels silly to follow up such a film buff entry with Morning Glory with Rachel McAdams, which is a lighthearted rom-com about a woman trying to get a morning show some better ratings. But I think it's cool to compare Diana and Becky. In Morning Glory, Becky is hired to save a station, but ultimately, that's not working out well, and so at the end of the film, she's told she has 6 weeks before they pull the plug on the program entirely. So she decides to dive into the unserious, silly entertainment morning shows delight in order to get ratings as high as she can in the hopes of saving the program. It's not exploitative in a cruel way, but it's still an acceptable level of money or viewer hungry, of bending journalistic integrity to get more ratings. Granted, they are a morning show, not evening news, so it's not the largest sacrifice, and there is a level of real joy about what is being shot and covered and shared to the world. But what really helps the station cement its renewal and get a bunch of views is not one huge final silly shenanigan, but instead Harrison Ford, who plays the high horse reporter Mike, getting a breaking news political story. He even lies to Becky to get her to cover this story, and when she says, "You should have just told me, I probably would have let you cover it," he doesn't seem to believe her. Even if Becky is motivated to protect the station and its employees, it's notable that a woman's drive in this field, if she wants to succeed, must still be financially considerate. The working woman in journalism, to an extent, must be corporate.
It can be argued that television, by focusing on women's relationships with men and thereby assuming their ultimate importance in women's lives, undermines the importance of female community.
So many movies about women, especially romantic ones, neglect to feature something so vital in characterizing these women: female friendships. Though the omission of female friends can explain certain things about her personality, it's always awkward unless it feels purposeful by the script. Waiting to Exhale is not a film about broadcast journalism, but it is a film about female friendship, specifically between Savannah, Bernadine, Gloria, and Robin, as they navigate the dissatisfaction of romantic partners while becoming closer to one another. Bernadine, played to perfection by Angela Bassett, is reeling from her husband's decision to leave her for another woman, a white woman, at his job. She has dedicated so much to help his career, while he actively discouraged her from having her own. Loretta Devine is Gloria, who owns a salon and has an 18-year-old about to go to college. Robin, played by Lila Rochon, has also found success at work as an executive at an insurance corporation. But Whitney Houston, in all her beauty, plays Savannah, a single and successful television producer. I'll investigate Savannah as a character more later, but let's talk about female friendships for the broadcast journalist first. In Little Black Book, the one friend that Savannah makes betrays her. The other woman she becomes unexpectedly friends with is Derek's ex, Joyce, to whom she is lying about her identity. At the beginning of the film, we do see a young Stacy watching TV and discussing her career goals with a female friend. But as she gets older, the focus shifts to boyfriends. Then, Stacy very publicly loses her friend and her boyfriend on stage at once. Stacy is denied female friendship, And it's sad. And it's her work that both causes this rift and also sort of replaces this void in her life. I think the film does sort of address this, though in a small and more comical way. When Stacy is at an interview at the end of the film, it's a woman who interviews her. She is kind and they laugh together, and you can probably infer that they will become friends. Little Black Book parallels its ending to Working Girl, in which a promoted Tess sits in her new office and calls her best friend. Except in Little Black Book, Stacy calls her mom. Then Carly Simon walks in. So then Stacy faints, and Carly Simon comes to help her, and then her mother faints, and it's this really nice full circle moment between them. This scene shows that Stacy does still value a woman's presence in her life, that the film values other women in Stacy's life. But I do wish a more concrete friendship was offered to Stacy in the end, even if the girl that was interviewing her asked if she wanted to get coffee later, or if Stacy asked her. Because before Barbara, who did Stacy talk to? Again, it reminds me a lot of Jenna in 13 Going on 30, whose only female friend is a bully and a fake who also betrays her, and her only other friend eventually becomes her husband. So again, who does she talk to? So often, adult friendships have to be cultivated in the workplace because we spend so much time there and less time in public spaces to meet strangers. Little Black Book's lack of friends for Stacy speaks to the working woman's lack of social life, sure, but it also speaks to Hollywood's inability to understand female friendships in movies unless the movie is about female friendship. It's like they fail to offer this support unless that support directly feeds into the plot. The same thing goes for Morning Glory, where Becky has nice female coworkers, but no friends. We do see her at least get lunch with 3 coworkers, 2 women and 1 man, but it also just exists to explain her relationship with her love interest Adam. They don't have a real conversation. We see the same thing with Jane in Broadcast News, whose best friend Aaron is a male coworker who was in love with her. Now, granted, they do have a really nice friendship at first. They banter and get along, they're intimate physically in a nice way, they call each other and talk about their aspirations and their insecurities. But when Aaron eventually says that he is in love with her, and she doesn't choose him and instead chooses Tom, he becomes kind of mean and distant. Then the entire station gets restructured and Aaron quits. And though they have a conversation and he says that they'll sort of be in each other's lives still and they'll still be friends, he moves away and it's obviously not the same. And then that's that. In Network, the idea of a friendship for Diana is mocked and satirized like everything else. She approaches an activist named Laureen Hobbs, whom she wants to make a program about, and says, "Hi, I'm Diana Christensen, a racist lackey of the imperialist ruling circles." Laureen shakes her hand and says, "I'm Laureen Hobbs, a badass commie N-word." Diana says back, "Sounds like the basis of a firm friendship." Savannah, in Waiting to Exhale, on the other hand, has vital female friendships. Yes, for the sake of the film's narrative, the friendships are more so the focus than her work, so the balance is achieved a little bit easier, but it does provide a rare glimpse of these very possible relationships for the working woman. Other than Savannah, none of the women in these films ends the film with a meaningful female friendship. And that further ostracizes them from their gender, pushing them to be informed and molded and defined by their workplace, of course, but also by their romantic relationships with men.
So I can't remember which came first, wanting to be a journalist or wanting to date a journalist. The two thoughts were completely smashed up together.
This quote by Nora Ephron, the love of my life, is sort of what I've been building to this entire video, because in all of these movies, romance and sex are so insanely tied up with the woman's career ambitions. In Waiting to Exhale, Savannah's 2 first solo scenes are with a man, both with disappointing outcomes. She only recently moved here, there's that trope again, and in her first scene with Bernie, she shares her feelings towards her new job. "I took a pay cut to see if I have what it takes to produce. Some of us are still on that dream trip, girl." The scene cuts to the most beautiful shot in the film, in my opinion. Bernie and Savannah holding hands on the patio, the purple sky and mountains behind them. There is an uncertainty here in terms of career for both Bernie and Savannah, as they both exist in a transitional work period and are there to support one another through it. Though Savannah's workplace in Waiting to Exhale is not central to the plot, 2 very meaningful scenes that really bookend her journey take place at her job. The first scene begins with a television set. that depicts a familiar image, the purple and orange sky, a vast field. Savannah twists some knobs as the camera pulls back, more screens framing her. We always have to get the classic several TV shot. She hears a message on her machine that pulls her away completely, the camera that was slowly panning, now completely centering her, and Savannah moves into the foreground, her system of machines that she can control in the background. The caller is Kenneth, an old lover who treated her well but is now married, and will be in town next month. Savannah calls her mom, knowing it was her that gave Kenneth her number. On the phone, her mom says, "Stop trying to act like you don't need nothing or nobody. Every woman needs a man." Savannah does not acknowledge any of this and says goodbye. The camera cuts to a wide shot, positioned outside the landscape-sized window that frames Savannah under the station sign. Camera and mics and ladders forming a technical and beautiful mise-en-scène. It's a shot we will see again later. Savannah narrates the boundaries that she will set when she sees Kenneth. What Savannah's mom fails to understand is that Savannah is not pretending to not want a man. Savannah is the person who actually says the exhale metaphor when she dances with a man. But Savannah also happens to be career-driven and has yet to find a man that is worth her time. Even this man, Kenneth, who loves her and wants her, is married with a child. Savannah opens herself up to the possibility anyway. How do you say no to a man that you used to be with who tells you he's loved you all this time and wants you while you are so lonely? But on the flip side, how can you love someone back when he's lying to his own wife to be with you? When Savannah finally decides that she can't be with Kenneth, she tells him off, and her mother calls her furious, having heard the news from Kenneth. Savannah, by no coincidence, is again at work when her mother calls. She is smiling on set with the on-air talent, and in the midst of really being needed and prioritized, and we see that. We see her working. She walks back to the same room, the camera tracking her, and stopping to use the window to frame her again, this time at a diagonal. Now, things are different than they were last time we were here. Savannah is different. Her new boundaries now need to be articulated to her mother, confronting her skewed perspective of her life. The camera moves inside the room the moment Savannah begins to do this, in sync with her dialogue. "Mama, do you hear me? I have a job. I have friends. Ma, I have interests that you don't even ask about." The conversation gets heated, and Savannah shouts and hangs up. The shot cuts back to the windowed frame during this feeling of isolation. She is pensive, and she calls back, the camera going back inside. Savannah's mom reveals she just doesn't want her daughter to be alone the way that she is. But though Savannah may not find love by the end of the film, it is not the end of her life. She knows that she would rather be loved on her own proper, respectful terms than settle for what's available. And above all, she isn't really alone. She has her girlfriends, whom she rings in the new year with, huge smiles on all their faces. I really love the decision to show Savannah's work life, to have these two important scenes that track her shift in her relationship to men, her mother, and in turn, herself. The film allows the location, the physical manifestation of her work, to bolster her identity and her image. Savannah's work is worthy and enough for her, and thus it's a worthy enough image for us to witness. Most obviously, Savannah is the only Black woman on this list, the only woman of color at all. Very few movies about broadcast journalism actually have a woman of color at the center of its narrative. This was actually a topic of discussion in real life when it came to the commonplace white and blonde look of television anchors. In a conversation with Diane Sawyer and Leslie Stahl, Sawyer said, "Back in 1982, Life magazine photographed the new kids on the block. Everyone there noticed something suddenly obvious. We were wall-to-wall blondes." Stahl then replied, "These were all the women in network television news, and everyone was a blonde." So obviously this is true, these are some of the biggest heavy hitters, but this is also in spite of the fact that several years prior, in 1975, the first Black female anchor for network news was Carol Simpson for ABC. So though none of the women in these films are anchors, the same standard of whiteness applies in the intertextual sense that these women are actors, still on camera, on screen, for Hollywood. Jean-Marie Lutez writes, "Newspaper women were called upon not only to be professional reporters, but also to be professional women, to fulfill a middle-class model of femininity that revolved around assumptions of racial whiteness and sexual inviolability. The idea of competing with a white woman plays a large role in the lives of the characters of Waiting to Exhale, specifically in terms of competing for a black male romantic partner. That Savannah is able to inhabit the space without comment on the racial dynamics of her workplace can either suggest a shift in the tide, as it was the mid-90s, a casual symptom of the film not being about the workplace but romance, or, if you're bell hooks, it's a neglect that further plays into the mock feminism of the film. Hooks criticized Waiting to Exhale for being apolitical, portraying Savannah as a professional black woman that is wild, irrational, and a castrating bitch goddess. It's very similar to critic Pauline Kael's issues with the character of Diana in Network. Even aside from the snarky view of working women, Kael criticizes how the narrative uses Diana's lover Max as the high and mighty man to leave television behind that gives Diana her most scathing criticism. The trick in Network is to use women's drive toward fame and success as the embodiment of the sickness of society. What's implicit is that if she could love, she wouldn't need anything more. During their breakup scene, Max is pleading to Diana to change who she is, but not solely in regard to her work ethic and treatment of people, but her treatment of him as a lover. Diana's shame has to be twofold. She has to be an unethical worker and an unethical lover. Her very second scene in the film, followed by the one in which her co-workers don't respect her, is a sexual one. She is post-coital, a man kissing her body while she watches the news and tells him to knock it off. We are visually told what will become of Diana before her plot even really unfolds. She is always going to choose work. Men as lovers will always be incidental and in turn reflect further just how heartless she really is. I quoted her earlier when she said that she has a masculine temperament, but even before she reveals that, Diana says she was married for 4 years, had an affair with her analyst, and also that she's a lousy lay. All of that sexual history is vital to Diana's characterization, instrumental in making it so that we can laugh and hate her even more. This is where I come in and talk about Little Black Book again. Did you miss me? After Stacy humiliatingly loses her boyfriend and quits her job, she tries to go to her favorite coffee shop, but it's closed. There, she runs into Bean, the boyfriend from college we saw her break up with. For a minute, it feels like fate. She says, "I've spent a lifetime preparing for a lifetime. Maybe you're the plan I was meant to hang on to." To be honest, I get really emotional at this line. I think a lifetime preparing for a lifetime is a bar and really pinches that workaholic nerve. Workaholics are the way that they are because planning means having control over your life when so much around you will try to take away that control. Being a workaholic instills within you a false sense of confidence, which is what we see in Stacy, that because you worked so hard, things are less likely to go wrong. And if they do go wrong, you think being busy means it won't affect you too deeply, but that's the exact reason why it wrecks you even more. You've spent a lifetime planning for the best and not preparing for the worst. Stacy lets go of this relationship with Bean and she's fine. And then she finds a better relationship for the time being. And it wasn't that she was too much of a workaholic to be vulnerable like Diana. It's that being so devoted to her work in such a crazy way revealed stuff within her and her relationship that she realized was not sustainable. And though it was not handled the best and the instincts that this toxic work environment enabled were detrimental, it was all for the best. It's a disillusionment with this form of news and entertainment. So Stacy pivots to fate, which is still just a planner but in a holier disguise. What are the chances of seeing Bean? Maybe this was the point of the grand plan. But Bean's pregnant wife emerges from the car behind him. Stacy will not be consoled away from healing and taking a break. Stacy continues, "Every plan I had for my life went so unbelievably wrong." For the record, she is like max 28 years old, but that's still a sentiment that rings true and resonates in a late-stage capitalist society with people who are in their early 20s also. We are indoctrinated to believe that our value comes from work and a lover. So if we don't have the success that we thought we would have in our work, we think we failed. If we are not loved in the way that we thought we would be, we think we failed. Bean, with great coffee shop wisdom, says, "You just gotta live. Stop planning your move. You can't know it all." And these are kind words to hear, especially for a working woman who has been raised to believe otherwise. In order for a woman to succeed, she does need to work twice as hard. She does have to be able to stand her ground. But then she can get used to that stance. She finds herself one day stuck in the mud, unable to grow or change, or even enjoy the life that she has worked so hard to obtain. Stacy goes home to her mom. She takes the time to reset before coming back to the city. Though she's single, she gets her dream job. She is going to be just fine. I really hope you found that entertaining and fun. Little Black Book is silly, but I love it, and I think it gets more shit than it deserves. Genuinely, this video would not exist without me rewatching that movie, and the topics of ambition, friendship, and love that it prompted me to look more into. But just before I go, let's drop the morning show shtick for a second and cover some serious news. Journalism is in a state of flux right now. Honestly, it usually is. But layoffs are consistent, publications are folding into one another, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to trust major news institutions, particularly now in the wake of their dramatic failure to properly and accurately cover what is happening in Palestine. Anchors and journalists with their headlines will go out of their way to refer to Palestinian children as anything other than a child, and manipulate rhetoric to deny Palestinians personhood and sympathy. The New York Times especially has been incredibly irresponsible and cruel in how it's chosen to cover the situation. But the work that we have seen come from student journalists at universities with campus protests, particularly Columbia in New York, reminds us of the true value of fostering truth and community within the United States. Columbia student radio station WKCR has produced some amazing work since the protests began, devoting most of their on-air time to live updates on the situation and speaking with students. Georgia Delane, the station's program director, said in an interview with Mother Jones that as soon as they receive a tip on the protests, they switch their programming. When asked what the media is failing to capture, Delane said, quote, "The student perspective. Certainly a lot of outlets are interviewing students, but I don't think to the level that we are. That's in part our ability to maintain trust. I think what some outlets are missing is just the intense discomfort with the atypicalness of what's going on campus right now." On the day that I was writing this conclusion, we learned that the Al Jazeera network, one of the few international networks with on-the-ground updates, was shut down by Israeli forces. The television network's equipment was confiscated from their offices in occupied East Jerusalem, their website was banned, and the TV channel was also banned. This is also following the murder of numerous Al Jazeera reporters and camera crew by Israeli forces. Mohammed Mouad, the managing editor of Al Jazeera, told Democracy Now! That their signal with the cable company was seized and that their locations were raided. Of course, all of this was conveniently executed shortly before the invasion on Rafah began, the city that was meant to be the safe zone. Bisan Auda, a reporter and filmmaker in Gaza, has been persistent in her vulnerable coverage on the ground, and her first pinned Instagram post is a video showcasing the rubble and destruction of her studio in Gaza. She cries at the sight of this, and she also includes clips of the furnished office, the crew who worked alongside her, and all of the equipment that she has lost. The significance of not only losing your home, your family, your legacy, but also the fruits of your labor, the work that is so instrumental to your identity, and the work that allows you to tell the world the information your oppressors don't want them to know, is not to be ignored. Bisan just won the Peabody Award for her coverage of the genocide in Gaza, an incredible achievement for a journalist, and one that she absolutely deserves. But it is so tragic that it's the documentation of the murder of her homeland and her people that has gotten her this recognition. This video obviously did not focus on the intense discomfort involved in the actual delivering of news and information in broadcast television. These movies don't really explore that. Holly Hunter in broadcast news gets sort of close to that image, where she witnesses gunfire in Nicaragua with the Sandinista army. And still, the film can't help but acknowledge the creative energy between Jane and Aaron in this moment, the smiles on their faces as they get this great coverage. In her most ethical journalistic moment in the film, criticizing her anchor boyfriend Tom for faking his tears at a woman's story of romance is still at the crux, because this is what provokes Jane to not trust Tom, to not want to travel with him. I don't think the solution is to make these women loveless in these films. nor is it to only make flat-out documentaries about newsrooms and conflicts. It's just interesting to see what narrative elements the American female journalist, programmer, and producer is given, and how they occur across different works, and how trivial it can all seem when you remember what journalism can actually look like. While movies are of course meaningful, they are just a refracted vessel of other ideas, not a main source of information or observation. If we want to talk about working women, reporters, and producers, their direct stories are out there, and sometimes romance is intricately involved. Take journalist Nada Bakri, who in Love and Loss in a Time of Revolution in the novel Our Women on the Ground, essays by Arab women reporting from the Arab world, write about the death of her husband Anthony Shadid, who was also a correspondent, and died on his journey back from Turkey. The last time I spoke with my husband was on February 14th, 2012. He was in northern Syria and called me from a satellite phone to wish me a happy Valentine's Day. It has been more than 6 years since Anthony passed away, and yet on some days it still feels as raw as it did that night in Turkey. I quit journalism, left my home in Beirut, and moved thousands of miles away from everyone I knew and everything familiar. Along the way, I became someone I didn't recognize. I lost my balance and the discipline I once had. Blood, Sweat, and Tears is not just an empty parable for many women in this field, and we owe it to them to listen. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will definitely have some resources in the description for Palestine. To all my new subscribers, hello, welcome. I hope you enjoyed that video, and definitely turn on the bell for notifications on when I post. I also have a Substack and website where you can find some of my other written work about film and culture, and yeah, see you next time.